Since 2013, I've spent my life in property, building a national home buying company, estate agency, and my own personal property portfolio. And I get asked all the time from investors, first-time buyers, or those just looking to move, which is best, buying a house or buying a flat? Now, 22% of properties are flats or apartments, and over the last decade, that percentage has actually been increasing. So this is becoming a more and more common dilemma. In this video, I'm going to explain why there are more and more flats, as well as the pros and cons of buying each, and why I've personally chosen not to invest in leasehold apartments as long-term investments. Let's get into it. Let's start with why are there more and more flats and apartments being built? There are two main reasons for this, and that is profitability and affordability. For a developer or a property investor, it comes down to money. It is far more lucrative to build a block of flats or split a house into flats in order to maximize the money that you can make from a site. Paired with this is affordability. With property prices going up and up and up, more and more people are having to consider buying a flat instead of a house. Of course, I know you can buy big penthouse apartments that can cost a hell of a lot more than a normal house, but most of the time, flats are a cheaper alternative to buying a house in any given area. The potential issue with buying a flat is most flats are leasehold, not freehold. The reason this is important is with a freehold house, you own the land and the house. With a leasehold flat, there is a company that owns the freehold or the entire building and the land, and you are essentially buying a long-term lease on a unit within the property or that block of flats. So that is why if you are buying a flat, you need to make sure you buy one with a very long lease. So if the lease is 999 years, that is ideal, and it's going to take a really long time for that to expire. Whereas if you buy a flat with a 60-year lease, firstly, it's unlikely to be mortgageable, and you're either going to have to pay to extend the lease, or if you let the lease run down to 0 years, then you're no longer going to own that flat. All legal rights would revert to the freeholder. That isn't the only thing to consider when buying an apartment. You will also have to consider ground rent and service charges. Now, ground rent is essentially rent you pay to the freeholder for the fact that your leasehold flat is sitting on their land. The reason you need to consider this is because there is actually no set guideline for how ground rent is set or charged. So some freeholders may charge huge amounts of money and others practically nothing. That obviously affects the value. The same goes for service charges. This is charged by the freeholder or the management company as a payment to upkeep the overall property. So think about all the communal areas of the property, and it usually includes the external of the property, so things like taking care of the roof and the gutters. The other key thing to watch for is if there is a doubling clause in the lease. The amount of sales I've seen fall through because the current owner and the buyer didn't realise it even existed. A doubling clause basically means that usually every 10 years the service charge doubles. Every 10 years forever. As a result, more and more mortgage companies won't lend on leasehold properties with doubling clauses, and it can be a bit of a pain to get rid of the doubling clause. These potential issues are exactly that, potential issues. So as long as you are diligent to buy flats with long leases and sensible ground rent and service charge arrangements, you need not worry. There are key benefits to buying a flat. These can be broken up into two key areas: cost and lifestyle. Firstly, the cost. In general, flats are cheaper. A 2-bed flat is likely going to cost less than a 2-bed house in the same area. So in general, it can be a great way to get onto the property ladder sooner or transition to more space in an area for less money. From an investor perspective, it has the same benefit to being able to afford a property investment sooner, and also the yields can often be higher than that on an equivalent valued house in the same area, for instance. However, the benefits aren't just financial. Living in a flat can bring with it really good lifestyle advantages. Firstly, you don't need to worry about maintenance of the building or the grounds or clearing the gutters. This is all sorted for you through the service charge you pay. Heating costs tend to be lower as you tend to have other apartments around you all sharing their heat, and it's a great lock up and leave type property. Also, a lot more fancy apartment blocks may have resident gyms, swimming pools, even cafes. I went to a friend's apartment in central London and it had a cinema room and a huge dining room and kitchen that you could book if you had a whole bunch of friends around. However, this video isn't just about flats, but also about considering houses too. The potential issues with buying a house is mainly the cost. The entry level to buying a house in an area compared to the entry level of buying a flat in an area is usually higher. And so if you can't afford a house, then either you will have to consider buying in a cheaper area, or you have to carefully select a flat considering all the pitfalls I mentioned earlier. The other main thing to consider is, although you don't have service charge or ground rent to pay on a house, you are responsible for the property inside and out. So if the roof starts leaking or the gutters need cleaning, that is all stuff you need to sort yourself. But there are huge benefits of buying a house. You own the property and land with a freehold house. This is why I personally stick to buying houses, not flats. I'll buy a house to split it into flats I own to rent, for instance, or I'll trade flats, so I'll buy a flat below market value to sell on or develop and sell on. But in terms of owning property long term, I stick to freehold as I want to build intergenerational wealth, and I like the idea of owning the land the property sits on. Also, bear in mind, house prices usually grow in value more than flats because flats are more likely to be leasehold, and in time that lease will reduce year by year, which makes the flat harder to sell and also less valuable because at some point you have to pay to renew the lease to extend it. Whereas with a freehold house, you don't have that problem. Also, if you're an investor, you can split the house into flats or smaller units, like a house of multiple occupancy, for instance. That offers you great longer term development potential in any house you've bought to rent long term. If you've enjoyed this, see you in the next video.